Time moved on, but the memory of that one night never faded for Daniel or Maria. That moment when he saw her sleeping outside in the cold had become a turning point. Not just in her life, but in his too. They had both grown in ways they never expected. They had both changed, and so had the world around them. Maria now lived in a small but beautiful house. Her son Lucas had started at a nearby school, where he made new friends and teachers praised his curiosity and manners. Maria walked him to school each morning before heading to the mansion. Still worked for Daniel, not because she had to anymore, but because she wanted to. Her job wasn't just work now. It was part of her life, and she took pride in every task. Daniel noticed the change in himself, too. His mansion didn't feel as cold anymore. The air felt warmer, more human. He heard laughter from the kitchen, greetings exchanged with sincerity, and sometimes even music playing softly from the staff quarters. He no longer walked past people without looking at them. He listened to their voices, noticed their moods, and asked about their families. The staff respected him more than ever, not out of fear or duty, but because they knew he respected them back. One Sunday morning, Daniel invited Maria and her family to his home, not for work, but as guests. He arranged a small brunch in the garden. Maria's mother sat comfortably in the shade, sipping tea. Lucas ran around the garden, laughing and playing with Daniel's dog. Daniel and Maria sat at the table, enjoying fresh fruit and light conversation. "You look happy," Daniel said gently. Maria smiled. "I feel happy." She looked out at her son. "For so many years I was scared every night. Scared about rent, food, his health, school. Now, I wake up without fear. That's the biggest gift anyone can ever give." Daniel nodded. "And you gave me something too. You taught me how to be human again." Maria looked at him kindly. "You were always human, sir. You just forgot for a while." They both laughed softly. Later that day, Daniel showed Maria something new. He took her to a small office next to the guest house. "I want to offer you a new position," he said. Maria looked surprised. "A new position?" "Yes," he said. "Household manager. You'll oversee all the staff, schedules, supplies, and planning. Comes with better pay, full weekends off, and decision-making power. You've already been doing most of it quietly, but now I want you to be recognized for it." Maria's hand went to her chest. "Me, but I'm not trained for that." "You don't need training," Daniel replied. "You have heart, discipline, and the trust of everyone in this house. It's more important than any certificate." Tears welled up in her eyes. She nodded slowly. "I accept." "Thank you." Daniel reached out and shook her hand. It wasn't a handshake between boss and employee. It was a handshake between two people who had grown to deeply respect each other. As the weeks passed, Maria settled into her new role with grace. She helped organize the staff, listened to their concerns, and handled every situation with calm and kindness. Under her guidance, the household ran smoother than ever. Daniel didn't have to worry about a thing. And more importantly, the people working there felt seen, heard, and appreciated. Outside of the mansion, Daniel's quiet actions were beginning to ripple. Several companies he had partnered with began offering better working conditions for their support staff. A few started staff housing projects or education funds. It wasn't just about helping one maid anymore. It was about changing a system. Daniel didn't want media attention. He avoided interviews and declined awards. He believed that kindness didn't need an audience. One afternoon, Caroline, his assistant, came into his office. "There's a letter for you," she said. It was sent by a woman from a town nearby. Daniel opened the envelope. It was handwritten. The woman, a domestic helper named Shazia, wrote, "I heard what you did for your worker, Maria. I just wanted to say thank you, not because you helped her, but because now my boss talks to me with respect. He gave me a day off last week for the first time in years. Said he learned something from a man who saw his maid. So, thank you for seeing her. You helped more people than you know." Daniel sat quietly for a long time after reading it. One small act of compassion had started to change people he'd never even met. One evening, Maria stayed behind after the other staff had left. She knocked on Daniel's study door. "May I come in?" "Of course," he said. She walked in slowly, holding a small box in her hands. "What's this?" Daniel asked. She handed it to him. "A thank you gift from Lucas and me." He opened the box carefully. Inside was a framed picture. It was a drawing clearly made by Lucas with bright colors and a big smiling sun. It showed a house, a garden, a boy holding hands with a woman, and next to them, a tall man with a kind smile at the bottom, and a child's writing were the words, "Thank you for saving my mom." Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at the drawing for a long time, unable to speak. Maria said softly, "We don't have much. We wanted to give you something from the heart." Daniel looked up, eyes glistening. "It's perfect. I'll keep it on my desk." And he did. Every day it reminded him that behind every number was a person. Behind every job title was a story. And behind every act of kindness was the power to change the world. He had started this journey thinking he was the one helping Maria. But the truth was, she had helped him just as much, maybe even more. Maria was no longer just a maid. When she was a leader, a mother, a symbol of strength, and Daniel. He was no longer just a millionaire. He had become something far more valuable. He had become human again, and together, without even trying, they had created a new kind of success, one built not on money, but on compassion, and that kind of success lasts forever. Daniel had never imagined that one small moment outside a bakery could change his life so deeply. He had always believed success meant power, numbers, and control. But now, every day felt different. He had started looking at people not as employees or strangers, but as individuals with their own stories, struggles, and silent hopes. Maria had settled into her new home. It was small compared to Daniel's mansion, but to her, it was a palace. It had clean floors, running water, a warm bed, and a quiet space for her son to study. Her son Lucas began smiling more, laughing more. He loved drawing pictures and showing them to Maria every evening. She pinned every drawing on the fridge, proud like any mother would be. Maria still came to work, but she looked brighter. There was no more tiredness in her eyes. She no longer rushed home to sleep in hidden corners or skipped meals to save money. For the first time in years, she felt safe. And that safety gave her energy, hope, and something she hadn't felt in a long time, dignity. Daniel noticed it too. He would watch her from a distance, working with a new joy. She hummed softly as she cleaned, smiled at other staff members, and even laughed once during lunch. Daniel didn't disturb her much, but every now and then, he would leave small notes with words like "thank you" or "you're appreciated." And Maria wasn't the only one who changed. After the new benefits were introduced, the atmosphere in the mansion completely shifted. The staff worked with more heart, not because they feared losing their jobs, but because they felt respected. The gardener brought fresh flowers from his village to decorate the hallway. The chef made a dish from his hometown and invited Daniel to try it. Even the security guard, who rarely spoke, started greeting everyone with a genuine smile. Daniel realized something powerful. When people feel seen and valued, they give back more than you ever expect. One evening, Daniel had a rare moment of free time. He sat in the garden with a notebook and wrote something unexpected. His thoughts. He wrote about Maria, about her courage, about how her silence spoke louder than words. He wrote about his own ignorance and how his eyes were finally open. It wasn't for the public. It wasn't for a speech. It was for himself. That same night, he got a call from a close friend, Richard, a fellow businessman. "I heard what you did for your maid," Richard said. "Is it true?" Daniel paused, unsure how much to say. "If you mean Maria, yes, I helped her. She deserved it." Richard gave a short laugh. "You've changed, Dan. A few months ago, you wouldn't even let your assistant leave work 5 minutes early." Daniel smiled to himself. "Maybe I changed. Maybe I grew up." Well, Richard added, "You might have started something. A few of us were talking. We're thinking about doing something similar in our own companies." That surprised Daniel. He hadn't done it to inspire anyone. He simply did what felt right. But the idea that others were paying attention touched him more than he expected. Over the next few weeks, other business owners started reaching out. They asked questions like, how did you set up the staff fund? Or what's the process for housing assistance? Daniel shared openly. He even organized a small event where domestic workers were invited to speak about their needs. It wasn't fancy. There were no cameras or red carpets, just honest voices being heard. Maria was invited to speak too. At first, she refused. Public speaking scared her. She didn't see herself as someone important. But Daniel gently encouraged her. You don't have to be perfect, he said. Right. Just be yourself. That's more than enough. So she stood up in front of a small group of employers and workers. Her voice shook at first, but soon it became strong and clear. She didn't complain. She didn't blame. She simply shared her story, her son, her sacrifices, her fears, and how one act of kindness changed everything. There wasn't a single dry eye in the room. After the event, a young housekeeper approached her. You gave me hope, the girl whispered. I thought I was invisible, but now I see I'm not alone. Maria held her hands and smiled. She felt a new kind of power inside her, not the kind that comes from money or titles, but from truth. Meanwhile, Daniel was changing things inside his own company too. He arranged regular wellness checks for employees. He created a listening room where anyone could come in and speak freely, no managers, no fear, just someone ready to listen. He started asking questions like, how's your family? Instead of just, is the report done? At first, people didn't know how to react, but slowly, they opened up. One employee admitted he was dealing with depression. Another said her mother was sick and she had been working double shifts just to afford medicine. Daniel helped them quietly, without making a big show. He understood something now. Real leadership wasn't about control, it was about care. Maria's son Lucas began visiting the mansion sometimes after school. He would sit quietly in the kitchen, doing homework while waiting for his mother. Everyone in the house loved him. He became a little brother to the staff, and sometimes even made Daniel smile with his curious questions. Are you really a millionaire? Right. He once asked Daniel. Daniel laughed. I suppose I am. Then why don't you act like one? Daniel raised an eyebrow. And how should a millionaire act? Lucas thought for a moment and said, like my mom. She's kind. She gives people hope. That one sentence stayed in Daniel's heart for days. One afternoon, Daniel received an invitation from a news outlet. They had heard about what he had done for Maria and wanted to feature his story. Daniel politely declined. He didn't want praise. He didn't want fame. All he wanted was for people to realize something important sometimes. The person cleaning your floor is the one who teaches you how to stand tall. Daniel continued his quiet mission. Helping where he could. Listening more. Judging less. And every time he saw Maria smiling as she worked, he felt a warmth he couldn't explain. It wasn't pride. It was peace. Because in a world full of noise, he had finally found something real. And all it took was one moment of seeing what he had never seen before. The days after Daniel spoke with Maria felt different. It was still the same millionaire with busy schedules, endless meetings, and important people wanting his time. But something inside him had shifted. It was like a quiet light had turned. On in a dark room, everything around him looked the same, but he was seeing it differently now. He started noticing the small things. The way his staff looked tired, but never complained. The way the security guard at the front gate stood for hours without a single break. The way the gardener trimmed every plant with care, even in the heat, before he had walked past them. He was truly seeing them. Maria had gone back to work after a few days of rest. She didn't ask for anything extra. She didn't even mention what had happened. She simply arrived at the mansion like she always did, wearing her uniform and a soft smile. Daniel couldn't go back to how things were. He knew he needed to do more. That morning, he called his assistant Caroline. Into his office. I want to ask you something personal, he said. Caroline looked curious. Of course, sir. Do you think I've been a good employer? Blinked. Well, you're fair. You pay well. You expect a lot, but you also give a lot. Why do you ask? Daniel leaned back in his chair. Because I realized I've never really asked anyone here how they're doing. Not really, I assumed. Paying them on time was enough. But maybe it's not. Carolyn was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled kindly. Sometimes people don't need help. They just need to feel seen. Daniel nodded slowly. That sentence stayed with him. Later that week, he invited Maria to sit down with him over tea. At first, she refused, saying she had chores to finish. But Daniel insisted. They sat in the garden. Birds chirped softly, and the wind moved gently through the trees. "Maria," he began, "I've been thinking about your situation, and I want to do something more permanent for you." She looked at him with a puzzled expression. "You've already done more than I ever expected, sir. I'm just grateful to still have a job." Daniel smiled. "That's not what I'm talking about. I've visited your hometown, saw the house you grew up in. It's falling apart. Your son deserves better, and so do you." Maria's eyes widened. "Sir, please don't feel responsible for me." "I don't feel responsible," he said, gently cutting her off. "I feel inspired by you. You worked in silence, sacrificed everything, and never once asked for help. You didn't wait for someone to save you. That takes strength. And it reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago." Maria looked down at her hands. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I just wanted my son to be safe. I didn't want him to grow up without chances. And now," Daniel said, reaching into his folder, "he'll have those chances." He handed her a set of papers. She looked at them and read slowly. Her hands began to shake. The documents showed a house fully paid for, in her name. It was in a safe neighborhood, not far from the mansion. The house had 2 bedrooms, a small garden, and all the furniture already arranged. She looked up at him, speechless. "I bought it yesterday," he said. "You'll move in this week. Your son can live with you. You won't need to sleep on the street or send money back every month. Everything is taken care of." Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks. I don't know what to say." Daniel smiled softly. "Say yes, that's all." Maria stood and slowly walked toward him. She didn't hug him. She simply held his hands and whispered, "Thank you." That moment was quiet, but powerful. And Daniel wasn't done. He called a meeting with the rest of his household staff. Everyone gathered nervously, unsure what was happening. Daniel wasn't known for group meetings. He stood in front of them and looked around. "I want to say something," he began. "I've been your employer for many years, and in all this time, I never stopped to really ask how you're doing. You've kept my home running. You've given your time, your effort, and your care, and I took that for granted." The room was silent. "But that changes now," Daniel continued. "Starting today, all staff will receive free health insurance, transportation assistance, and 2 paid days off every month beyond regular leave. I've also created an emergency fund for personal issues, medical help, or family needs. No questions asked." Some workers looked at each other in disbelief. Few had tears in their eyes. "You don't just work here," Daniel added. "Part of this home. And from now on, I want you to feel that way." After the meeting, Caroline walked up to him and said, "You're not the same man you were 2 weeks ago." Daniel smiled. "Maybe I was just sleeping. Someone finally woke me up." That evening, Maria moved into her new house. Daniel quietly watched as her son ran through the living room, laughing and pointing at the television. Her mother sat on a soft chair with a warm cup of tea, and Maria. She stood by the window, breathing deeply, smiling quietly. Daniel didn't stay long. He didn't want to make a big moment out of it. He just gave her one last look and said, "Welcome home." As he walked away, Maria whispered behind him, "You saved us." But Daniel didn't turn around. He simply said, "No, you saved me." Because in helping Maria, Daniel had discovered something he had never bought with money: human connection. He had found purpose not in building more towers, but in lifting someone up. And from that moment forward, Daniel wasn't just known as a successful man, he became known as a kind one, and kindness always leaves the strongest legacy. The next morning, Daniel sat alone in his home office. The sunlight came through the large glass windows, but he wasn't paying attention to the view. His coffee had gone cold, and his laptop screen was still on the login page. He had been staring into space for nearly an hour, thinking about Maria. He kept remembering her curled up on that cold sidewalk. Her face, her voice, the way she had tried to hide her pain, it had all stayed in his mind. Daniel was used to moving quickly through problems Business deals, meetings, numbers, he handled them with ease. But this was different. This wasn't about money. It was about something much deeper. The night before, after Maria had fallen asleep in the hotel room he booked for her, Daniel had sat in the car outside for a long time. He didn't feel proud or heroic. He just felt something shift in his heart. He couldn't understand how he had been so blind. Maria had been walking in and out of his house every day, yet he never really saw her. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Carolyn, good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she said. Cheerfully, "Morning," Daniel replied. "I need you to pull up Maria's file. I want to know everything. How long she's been with us, her salary, history, anything else you can find." Carolyn sounded surprised, but didn't ask questions. "Of course, I'll email you shortly." Within minutes, Daniel had the file open on his screen. Maria had been working for him for 8 years. Never late, never took sick leave. She had refused bonuses 3 times and had only accepted the smallest pay raises. She had even turned down the holiday gift card last Christmas. Her records were spotless. But the numbers told him something more. Maria had been quietly sacrificing her own life to support someone else. Daniel sat back in his chair and sighed. He thought about all the times he had passed her in the hallway without a second look, all the times she had cleaned around him while he was on calls, and he hadn't said a word. Now he realized how much she had hidden behind that quiet smile. He decided to visit her hometown, not to spy, but to understand. The next morning, Daniel flew to a small town 3 hours away from the city. He didn't take his usual assistant or security. He wanted to go alone. He hired a local driver and asked for directions to the address listed in Maria's emergency contact form. The town was simple. Dusty roads, small houses, and friendly people who looked surprised to see a man in a suit walking around. The house Maria's family lived in was small, with cracked walls and a broken wooden gate. An elderly woman sat outside under the shade, fanning herself slowly. "Excuse me," Daniel said gently. "I'm looking for Maria's mother." The woman looked up. Her eyes were sharp but tired. "I am Maria's mother. Who are you?" Daniel introduced himself politely. At first, the old woman looked unsure. But when he explained that he was Maria's employer and that he was concerned, her face softened. "She didn't want you to know," she said. "She's proud. Too proud sometimes." Daniel sat with her and listened to stories. She spoke about Maria's late husband, a kind man who had died in a car accident when their son was just a baby. After that, everything had changed. Maria had once been a schoolteacher, well-loved in their town, but with no income and rising hospital bills for her son, she had moved to the city in search of work. She found a cleaning job at Daniel's mansion and sent almost all her money back home every month. She never thought about herself, the mother said. Always her boy first. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He looked at the small boy, playing quietly in the corner. He had a gentle smile and large, curious eyes. Maria had spoken the truth. Every penny went into giving him medicine, food, and books. She was living on almost nothing. As Daniel left the house, he stood outside for a moment, looking up at the sky. The world looked different now. He had always measured success by numbers, profits, charts, buildings. But here, in this small village, he saw a different kind of success. One built from love, patience, and endless sacrifice. When Daniel returned to the city, he didn't go straight. Home, he went to the hotel where Maria was still staying. He had arranged for her to rest for a few days and told her she didn't have to come to work until she was ready. He knocked on her door. Maria opened it slowly and looked surprised to see him. "Sir, is everything all right?" Daniel gave a small smile. "May I come in?" She stepped aside. The room was simple but clean. She had kept it tidy, of course. "I visited your mother and your son," he said calmly. Maria froze. You went there?" "I did." Daniel nodded. "I wanted to understand." She sat down, clearly overwhelmed. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to bring my problems to your door. I just needed the job. I didn't want to lose it." Daniel sat across from her, His tone was gentle. You didn't do anything wrong, Maria. You were doing what any loving parent would do, and I was blind to it. That's my fault. Maria didn't say anything. Right. Her hands trembled a little. I want to help, Daniel continued. Not because I feel sorry for you, because you've shown more strength, more heart, and more honesty than most people I've ever met. She looked at him, unsure. Help? How? He smiled again. Let me worry about that. You don't need to sleep on the street ever again. You've worked hard enough. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She had never expected this moment. She had prayed for strength, not favors. But now someone was finally seeing her not just as a maid, but as a human being. That night, Maria cried for the first time in years. Not because of pain, but because someone finally cared. And Daniel finally felt something return to his heart. A sense of purpose, a spark of humanity. Something had changed in both of them forever. Daniel Whitmore was a man who had everything. He owned several businesses, lived in a glass mansion on a hill, and never had to worry about money. People respected him, feared him, and talked about him like he was untouchable. He was known as a tough businessman, someone who never wasted time and never showed too much emotion. But deep inside, Daniel felt something missing. He didn't know what it was, just knew that his heart felt quiet, even when his life looked perfect on paper. That night, Daniel left a high-end charity event in a black limousine. The event was full of wealthy people smiling and shaking hands, pretending to care about the poor while sipping expensive wine. Daniel had smiled too. He had made a speech, donated a large check, and nodded at cameras. It was what people like him were supposed to do. But by the end of the evening, he felt tired. Not physically tired, but mentally and emotionally drained. He leaned back in his seat and asked the driver to take the longer route home. He wanted a quiet ride. The city looked different at night. The lights were softer, the streets less crowded, and the truth of the city seemed to show itself when nobody was looking. As they passed through a quieter street near an old bakery, Daniel's eyes caught something strange on the sidewalk. He saw a small figure lying near a wall, wrapped in a thin gray blanket. At first, he thought it was just another homeless person. Sadly, he had seen many of them over the years, and like most people, he often looked away. But this time, he didn't look away. He looked closer. The person had a familiar shape, a familiar face. Daniel leaned forward and squinted. He tapped the driver on the shoulder. "Wait, stop the car," he said firmly. The driver looked confused. "Sir? Here." "Yes." "Stop right now." The car came to a slow stop near the curb. Daniel opened the door and stepped outside. The cool air hit his face, and the sound of the city seemed louder here. He slowly walked toward the sleeping figure, his polished shoes clicking against the sidewalk. He bent down carefully, not wanting to startle the person. And then his heart skipped a beat. It was Maria, his housemaid. She had worked for him for more than 8 years. She was always polite, always early, always working hard without a single complaint. She wore the same neat uniform every day and kept the mansion spotless. Daniel had seen her hundreds of times, but never like this. Her face looked tired. Her hands were rough and cold, and her eyes, though closed, seemed restless. She had a small bag beside her. Daniel couldn't understand what was happening. Why was she here? Why was she sleeping outside like this? He softly said, "Maria." She woke up slowly, blinking in confusion. When she saw him, her eyes widened. She quickly sat up and tried to hide her face. "Sir, I'm sorry." "I didn't expect." Daniel held up his hand. "No, please, what's going on?" She shook her head, looking away. "It's nothing. I'm just resting here. I'll be gone in a moment." Daniel's voice was calm but serious. "Maria, you've worked in my home for years. You're sleeping on the street. It's not nothing. Tell me what's going on." Maria hesitated. Her lips trembled a bit. She didn't want to cry. She had spent so long pretending to be strong. But tonight she couldn't hide. "My son is sick," she said softly. "He lives in my village with my mother. The hospital bills are expensive. I send most of my salary to them every month. A few months ago, my roommate moved out and I couldn't afford the rent alone. I tried to find a cheaper place, but..." She stopped and looked down. This is temporary. I clean up in the morning before work. I'm fine. Really. Daniel was speechless. He had assumed Maria lived a simple life, but a stable one. He had never asked. He had never wondered. He paid her, gave her work, and thought that was enough. But now, seeing her like this, it felt deeply wrong. You could have told me, he said quietly. Maria smiled sadly. And risk losing my job? No, sir, I didn't want pity. Just wanted to keep working. Daniel stood silently for a moment. A car passed slowly behind them. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world kept moving, but something inside. Daniel had paused. Come, he finally said. You're not staying here tonight. No, please, I'm not asking. I'll take you to a hotel. You can rest, take a hot shower, and eat something warm. Please, Maria, let me do this. Maria looked up at him. Her eyes were full of hesitation, but also full of exhaustion. After a moment, she nodded. Daniel gently helped her up. She moved slowly, clearly stiff from the cold ground. He opened the car door for her, and the driver, though surprised, said nothing. As they drove, Daniel kept thinking. His world had always been about deals, profits, and growth. Had donated money to causes, but never truly connected to the people behind those causes. But now, right next to him, sat a woman who had quietly served him for years while suffering in silence. He looked at her again. She had fallen asleep, her head gently resting against the window, her fingers still clutching. Her old bag, like it, held everything she owned. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something stir in his chest. He didn't know exactly what he would do next. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just forget this night. Maria was no longer just the maid. A mother, a fighter, a human being with a story that deserved to be heard, and Daniel was finally listening.